Let's start with a question. Can oil change alliances? Well, US President Donald Trump believes it can.
Last night, I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama.
The strikes come just hours after Maduro had said he was open to negotiations with the U.S.
There's a 5-step playbook the United States has used for foreign intervention over the last 70 years. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's not even about the intent at all. It's a pattern hidden in plain sight that isn't even written down in any official manual anywhere. But it's so consistent, it's become a historical cycle. It's a strategy that was run in Panama, refined in Iraq, and led to the total collapse in Libya. And now with the removal of Venezuela's president, we may be watching the same sequence unfold again in real time. Today I want to walk through what I call the 5-step regime change cycle, not as an accusation, but as an analytical framework. Because if we don't understand the pattern, we keep pretending that every intervention is a unique exception, right up until the consequences arrive at our doorstep. Now, historians and analysts have identified this modus operandi in dozens of U.S. foreign policy interventions in the past, particularly during the Cold War. It begins not with a bang, not at all, but with a squeeze. Let's get into it. First step in this playbook is the economic squeeze. The first move is almost always an economic pressure. Before a single soldier is deployed, the target nation is put into a financial chokehold. The goal is to weaken the regime from the inside out, stir up popular discontent, and make the country ungovernable. This strategy was famously summarized during the Nixon's administration regarding Chile's democratically elected government at the time, make the economy scream. This is done through a barrage of sanctions designed to cut a country off of the global financial markets, target key state-owned industries, and block access to international loans. We saw this exact play run again in Venezuela. While years of internal mismanagement and corruption had already crippled Venezuela's economy, U.S. sanctions acted as a powerful accelerant in this case. Measures imposed after 2017, for instance, specifically targeted its economic lifeboat, which is the state-run oil company, strangling its primary source of revenue since that time.
The United States says it has seized another Venezuelan oil tanker. The Olena is on multiple countries' sanctions lists. It is the third tanker seized by the US just this week.
While proponents argue that sanctions target corrupt officials, their broader effect is actually felt because it deepens an economic crisis that creates the perfect backdrop for the next step, which is to isolate and delegitimize. With the economy in free fall in this nation, the next step is to turn the leader into an international pariah. A sustained diplomatic and media campaign emerges that frames the head of state as a brutal dictator, a human rights abuser, or a threat to global peace. The goal is to destroy their legitimacy completely at home and abroad, making their removal seem not just necessary, but as a righteous cause. This was a key element before the 1989 invasion of Panama. Manuel Noriega, once a CIA asset, was rebranded as a corrupt narco dictator, justifying the US intervention to remove him from office. Simultaneously, the US often works to create a parallel government by identifying and funding opposition figures. We saw this again in Venezuela. The step was executed with textbook precision. The international recognition of an opposition leader as interim president, even while Nicolas Maduro was still controlling state power, polarized the country and gave political cover for escalating pressure within Venezuela. The leader is now isolated. The country is broken, and the stage is set for a more direct action from this playbook. The third, which is the decisive action. This is the kinetic part of the playbook, the coup, the bombing campaign, or a full-scale invasion. It's when the conflict boils over into overt military action with one clear objective: remove the leader from power. In Panama, this was Operation Just Cause, a swift invasion by around 26,000 U.S. troops to capture Noriega. In Libya, it was months-long NATO-led air campaign that evolved from protecting civilians to toppling Muammar Gaddafi. These operations often succeed in their primary mission. Noriega was captured, Gaddafi was overthrown from office, and in January 2026, this step was executed in Venezuela. U.S. forces launched a strike on Caracas, capturing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. For the architects of intervention, this moment feels like victory. You check out the news, that's what you get. To the nation under a brutal dictator, it's a signal of hope. The target is eliminated, but as history shows us, removing the leader is often the easy part. Now, the next step is the power vacuum. This is the step where the playbook often backfires catastrophically. After the leader is removed from office, the state institutions, often held together by that same autocratic figure, can actually shatter. The military might dissolve, the police disappears, and the civil service collapses, leaving a complete power vacuum in these nations. The most infamous example is Iraq in 2003. The policy of de-Baathification purged anyone associated with Saddam Hussein's party, and most disastrously disbanded the Iraqi military. This decision puts hundreds of thousands of trained, armed, and unemployed men on the streets, many of whom formed the backbone of deadly insurgencies that we later saw in the country. Instead of building a democracy, the policy hollowed out the state that created a void filled by sectarian wars. A similar collapse was what we saw that occurred in Libya. After Gaddafi's fall, the state effectively ceased to exist. The country fractured along tribal and regional lines, with multiple militia fighting over oil wealth, and that the nation fits perfectly into a resource-cursed state. The intervention, meant to prevent a humanitarian crisis, ended up creating a failed state and a source of regional instability that persists even until this day. Now, I know I've said a lot right there, but before I go into the fifth point, permit me to mention to you that the conversations on this channel seek to bridge the gap in the reasoning that is often lost in political noise. Here, we actually don't debate blue versus red. Nothing's wrong with it. I watch some of those channels, but I think it robs us of the nuance. It dumbs down conversations and undermines public trust overall. So I invite you to support the effort on this channel by simply clicking on the subscribe button. It goes a long way in actually helping us to grow on the channel. And let's get back into the conversation with step 5 in this playbook, the unwinnable aftermath. The final step is the grim consequence of the power vacuum, a long, bloody, and unwinnable aftermath. Having shattered the existing state, the U.S. is often left with two equally disastrous options. One is a prolonged, costly occupation, or a hasty exit that leaves behind a failed state in these nations. In Iraq, for instance, the choice was occupation, a nearly decade-long counterinsurgency that cost thousands of American lives and trillions of dollars, only to leave behind a deeply fractured government. In Libya, the choice was a hasty exit. NATO declared victory and left, abandoning the country to civil war and chaos, many of which exist even till date in Libya. In both cases, you think about it, the outcomes was arguably far worse than the situation the intervention was meant to solve in the first place. The playbook designed to assert control, often produces chaos and empowers extremists in these nations. Now let's come back to Venezuela, which represents a terrifyingly current test case of this pattern from this playbook. January 3rd, 2026 will go down in history, but the playbook moved to step 3 with U.S. military strikes on Caracas and the capture of Maduro and his wife. Unlike in Iraq in 2003, which had a powerful army that was deliberately dismantled, Venezuela's institutions were already crumbling from within after years of economic crisis and political polarization and corruption on ground. The question everyone is asking now is what comes next? And I think that's a valid question. The U.S. administration has stated it will run the country during a transition. There is a recognized opposition led by figures like the Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado, who have significant popular support from across the world and are poised to lead a transition government. And this is a stark difference from the power vacuums that we saw in Iraq and in Libya. Proponents of this intervention hope that this could lead to a stable transition similar to Panama, where an existing established elite was ready to take over after Noriega's removal. However, the risk of collapse remain incredibly high right now in Venezuela, in my opinion. Removing Maduro's regime wasn't just the head of a snake off. It's like pulling the last support beam out of a house that was already falling apart. The immediate result could still be an implosion into a failed state ruled by patchwork of political factions, criminal gangs, or even paramilitary groups, all fighting for one thing: control of the nation's vast oil reserves. Now, from Guatemala in 1954 to Iraq in 2003, and Libya in 2011, and now Venezuela in 2026, this 5-step playbook has been a recurring theme in U.S. foreign policy. It's a strategy that consistently upends the existing order, for better or for worse. The tragic irony in this case is that while these interventions are often sold as efforts to promote democracy, they have become one of the most effective ways to engineer failed state and resource-cursed countries. Now, with the playbook having reached its kinetic phase, as I described in that playbook in Venezuela, the world is watching with keen interest. Will this time be different in the execution of this playbook? Or is the cost of running this play time and time again always paid for by the millions of ordinary people that are left behind in the rubbles of these nations? I hope you don't get me wrong, actually, in this whole narrative that I'm putting up this time. I've actually lived under dictatorships in the past, and I wouldn't wish that for anyone. But this monologue is not postured as a pro-Trump or anti-Trump talking point or pro-Maduro. I don't think anyone in their right mind would even support Maduro. You would need a shake in the head. Regardless, I think the truth about the U.S. playbook stands. But don't take my word for it. I want to know what you think. With Maduro gone out of office, what's next for Venezuela? Can a stable democracy emerge, or will it follow the same path that we've seen for Iraq and Libya in the past? I want to know what your thoughts are in the comment section. I respond to almost all comments that go beyond the slogans. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way in supporting the work that we're doing here. We'll chat in the comment section. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.